All right, good morning. Thanks for dropping in with us here in our group, our Teams Tuesdays. So I'm just going to jump right in here, and we're going to run through the beginning slides here. Real quick, the normal intro, who eGroup is, who I am, kind of what we're going to cover. We'll go into what's new this week with Microsoft Teams. Question and answers period. Really, we're just going to talk about how do we extend Teams, some of the options that you have, and talk a little bit about that. Share a little bit inside of Teams, some things that are out there. So no specific Q&A there, just a general framework around that. But that being said, if you have questions, you'll free to add those in here as we go along, and then a quick outro how to contact us. So Teams Tuesdays, we do these every other Tuesdays. It's a bi-weekly event. Right now, if you have any questions whatsoever, if you want to just drop them in the chat, I have Carly here to help with those. We'll bring those up, try to answer those as we go along. I think we can actually unmute you in this session too. So if you're open to it and you want to give it a go, just do the little hand raising thing in Teams if you're familiar with that, and Carly will try to unmute some folks there and then let them jump in. But so we might have a couple of options there. If you're uncomfortable with the public forum, please feel free just to hit us up at info@egroup.us.com and we'll answer your question there as well. So eGroup, we've been around for quite a while. We were founded in 1999. So, we do have Microsoft Gold partner competencies. We are a managed partner, a national managed partner. So I think we're listed one of the top 30 partners now nationally, at least on Microsoft's radar. But we do more than just Microsoft. So we do traditional data centers, which we, term the private cloud now. And of course, hybrid, connecting the two together, both, with Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365. I myself am actually coming up on 9 years with eGroup now, just a few months away from that milestone. So I've been here quite a bit. I have a background going back to the Microsoft platforms, all on-premise deployments with Active Directory, managing servers, SharePoint Exchange, and those type of things, as well as a bit of a security background before I was with eGroup. I worked as a DoD contractor. So happy to be here and join with you today to talk a bit about Teams. So we're going to dive in here. First thing is what's new. So real quick, just the level set when we cover what's new, we're not really looking at what they've put on their public roadmap. If you're not familiar with that, Microsoft publishes a roadmap with everything they're working on, but it doesn't really ever come with release dates and so forth, right? So that will be determined when it actually hits your tenant. So we try to rely on what's actually in Teams, what's been released, what actually hit it, and what's live out there right now. So the last update that has happened since our last Teams Tuesday is they've enabled what's called Spotlight. So in here, you can see the screenshot is essentially we can spotlight up to, actually, I believe it's 7 individuals now, which will put the focus on those individuals on a screen. So here you can see we have kind of a side-by-side where they're spotlighted with the speakers that are there. So you can have 1, 2, 3, when you want to highlight those conversations, and you can change those on the fly. So whoever the organizer is of a meeting, you can simply right-click, an image or a person and say spotlight it. If you're the organizer, you can also say spotlight myself, and then have it front and center there for your meetings. If you're familiar kind of with Zoom and WebEx, that's a similar function that's been available there for a little bit. A couple of things to note on where this is, because it's a new feature. That's where I added here on this slide. When you do a recording, like we're recording now, if I had spotlighted, the individuals or 2 individuals here, it doesn't show up that way in the recording. It actually shows up like a normal Teams window with kind of the changing context a bit. That's being fixed and worked on right now currently. So soon when you have those on there, basically what you're looking at will be recorded. So something to be aware there, because it's not something you're going to know until you go back and actually look at the recording. The other thing to know is that if you use Teams, what's called large gallery mode or together modes, if you're familiar with those, is spotlighting, of course, doesn't work in those, and that's because those are already specific to you. So large galleries, when you're going to have all of those different 7x7 tiles, and you show everybody's smaller images on the screen. Together mode are the different virtual modes they have with like the auditorium seating or the meeting seating there. So again, Spotlight, that's the new thing. That's just hit. And if you're not seeing it now in your Teams client, you just have to wait probably for the update to roll out. So you should be hitting it any day now, because it's actually live in a few of the environments we've already been in. So getting into today's topics, extending Microsoft Teams. So When we talk about extending Microsoft Teams, it's really how do we go about doing a little bit more than what you get out of the out-of-box behavior. When I say out-of-the-box behavior, when you first turn on Microsoft Teams, you essentially can do chats, you can do meetings, you can create your teams with your channels in different contexts, and they basically come, with chats and file support. And what can you do beyond that? So there's a number of things that you actually can do to extend that. So we can go ahead and, oh, give me 1 second. Oh man, that was unexpected there with those guys. Sorry about that, but there's a number of ways that we can extend these here. So it starts with the easy things, and I'm going to show teams here to go through all that. One are the tabs. So you can add tabs with different contexts, different apps, and different websites and things to bring your work together. That's why I've got that marked down here. Message extensions, activity feed integrations, bots and outgoing webhooks. These can go from high code to what we call low code, which I'll talk a little bit about low code here next, for extending it and customizing teams. But then you also have your connectors and apps, which can be custom, but or a low code, something that you develop and add, but they can also be out of the box. There's a gallery with different apps and things that you can add to add those different functionalities. So when we talk about the low code options, we basically have what we call the Power Platform. So if you're not familiar with that, there are a number of tools here. Power BI I'm not showing here, but Power BI is a reporting platform that you can also integrate. That generally requires some additional licensing outside of your Office 365 contents to get access to it. However, Power Automate is the one here. Power Apps and Power Virtual Agents are actually all included with Microsoft Teams when you have that the full Office 365 SKUs or M365 SKUs. So Power Apps are for building like custom forms, right? I mean, in the larger context by itself, it can do some standalone apps, but within Microsoft Teams, it's kind of a custom form with some business logic tied to, a database table, Excel forms, and those type of things. And Power Automate, this is a workflow engine. So this is essentially where you can take triggers. So you can say, when I get a message in Teams, I want to send a notification out in Outlook, or I want it to do something in Teams and collect information. So I can tie that in there and work within the context of chats and streams. Power Virtual Agents is an internal bot framework that you can deploy within Microsoft Teams as well. So I can essentially build like a Q&A bot, which is the out of the box experience where you get in and you can add those in there. And you can think of things like, internal help desks, right? Because it has to work within the context inside of Teams internally. So you can do that. If you have some FAQs, those can be added in there. There are some HR scenarios you can think about. You can add those in there across like intranets. So instead of going in and searching for something specific, you can set that up so I can ask the boss a question and it will return or serve something up as far as a link into getting those. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and then switch over to our Teams window. All righty. Okay, I'm going to go over to Teams. We're going to come back to this view here in a second, but I want to show you down here. When we're talking about Teams and customizing it, we can go into a gallery here. If I click More Apps, you'll notice there are a lot of apps available out of the box that we can add in here. Not all of these are Microsoft. Some of these are third party. Some are free to add. Some, they have that free tier. Some are also kind of pay to use because they are third party. So you would have to have another subscription to use some of these services in here. So you can see this has basically a store in here with different areas that are in here. And these are very similar to the extension capabilities that I just went over down here, how they get grouped in here. But if we just click on one like productivity, you can see we have a lot in here. Some of these are Microsoft, right? So when we look at the ones at the top, most of these are Microsoft. SharePoint approvals, these are all built-in things in here that Microsoft adds, and you can see they are tagged with Microsoft. This one right here, Trello, that's a pretty popular one. It has Kanban boards for project management, but that is not Microsoft. So the publishers are listed in the name, so do be aware of that. When it comes to apps as well, out of the box, everything's enabled. Right. So if that's not the experience you want, then you have to actually go into the Teams Admin Center, update your policies there to restrict which apps you allow by default. I would say, generally speaking, unless you're a smaller shop and you really don't have any worry around like the data integrity of the things that are happening inside of Teams, you most likely are going to want to go in and shut those off and only approve the apps for the integration that you want to utilize. So this is a very easy way, again, to integrate things that are out there and services that are out there already. So if you already have a lot of SaaS apps, check in here. There might be an integration that's already included in here. And these will range as well. So it could be a completely separate app, more or less. It's a window within Teams that you're going to work off of. Or it could be from an integration in the chats in the bots framework where it'll let you like interact with that app through the bots in the chats. It might be something like integrating like alerts or messaging and those type of things. So there's different levels of integrations that are available to you through these applications, and each one is really dependent on what the application developer has opened up for you. So jumping back over here to Teams, if we're in a team, so we saw the apps. The apps can be directly on your sidebar here, and they can be accessed directly. So if we look at these, we can consider these as internal apps, right? Now, if we're in a team, you'll see traditionally we'll start with their posts, which are this channel feed that you have. It's like a persistent chat message thread here. We have our files. This is going to link back to your shared storage here for the team. So direct folder, anybody getting in here, access the Teams, of course you have that. And your wiki. So the wiki is not like, if you're familiar with other wiki products, it's not what I call a full-fledged wiki, but it's functional enough. You can drop notes on it or anything you want here in the general tab here. It can work as a good like about page too. If you want to put some more context around what the team is, you can kind of just call that an about page, add some details in there, and then move on. Now, those will be the 3 defaults that you get. And when you want to extend it, you're just going to come over here, click plus, you're going to add a tab. You'll notice in some cases we get access to the same apps that we have. So I can add an app into the tab, and that functionality we brought in there. But I can do things just with the Microsoft context as well to extend my team. If I'm working on a project, I might want to have some type of project list in there. I might do that with our SharePoint lists. Perhaps I'm going to do that with the planner and tasks that are part of Microsoft 365. If you have project, there's boards you can do in that. Or if I just need to go to something that doesn't have an integration, but I have a website, that's where I can use this generic kind of website URL there. Now, most of the apps in here that are dedicated apps, especially the Microsoft ones, have the single sign-on functionality. So when I embed that in Teams, of course, it's going to pass in your user tokens, and it's all a seamless experience. If I use something like the website app and it has authentication in it, it might pop up and ask for authentication within those contexts. So just something to keep in mind there. So here, I'm going to drop out because I already have a tab here. If I click on this tab is actually a view of Microsoft Planner. You'll notice I've got my different tracking stacks here. So if I'm got my tasks for people that are responsible for delivering them, my different statuses for where they are, but this is what Planner looks like, and that's how it's integrated. I could also put something like an Excel sheet or go directly to a Word document or a PDF document as a tab in there. I don't know if you saw that was in there. So like Visio, diagrams, a Word, and instead of going into a library and having to click it, what this does is this just lets you essentially put the entire document there for your view, right? So you click it, you open it up, you'll just see that Word document with whatever you want in it. So it's right in the context of whatever you're doing. I can add additional OneNote notebooks too. This is always a good one to add into your teams because you can interact with it in your teams, keep those notes ongoing where everybody can participate, and also interact with that in your normal OneNote, notebooks so you can access them outside of Teams. So, tabs by itself is a pretty powerful way to customize and contextualize your Microsoft Teams sites, and everybody really can do it. Well, anybody that has rights, at least to manage their team, right? You don't need coding experience for that. If you need to take this up a notch and you need to build like a custom form to collect data, that's where you're going to go to that Power Platform, and you're going to go in there and utilize that. So in here in this app, I've already actually loaded it, but if you've got a new team site, what you'd have to do is search for it in here. So you would start, with Power Automates like that. And now I've got it here. I would click on it and it will load it that first time and get it integrated for your use. So once you're in there though, it's fairly easy to get started. And I'll say it's easy to get started, but there's a little bit of a learning curve, at least with the Power Apps side of things when you're building inside of Microsoft Teams. But you'll notice this first page you get to is here, and they do have some starter apps that you can use here for building whatever you need to build. Typically, this is going to start with some type of form where you collect information, and you can have some logic and some storage behind that. And you can tie this as well with Power Automate in the next step, right? So once you've got your collection method in here, you might want it to go do something else. Perhaps once that form is collected, it has to go through an approval process. So for that, we can actually tie that into Automate. When you're in here in Power Apps, it's a little bit more advanced, but there is a button in there that lets you tie those flows directly into Power Automate itself. So it kind of chains off that. If we just want to have directly that workflow in here, we would come in and build that in here. Just like with Power Apps, if we scroll down, you'll see some starter type of recipes and templates that we can use here. These are already kind of filtered for you in the context of Microsoft Teams, and you can utilize these for getting started. So if you're not really familiar with it and you haven't got into it, I would just encourage you, like, open it up, go in here and start playing around a few of these, right? So in this case, I could use a form to collect information. I don't even have to use Power Apps. I could use Microsoft Forms, and then I could use Automate to kind of notify us when the form data or somebody's entered data in the form, and then we can go check it. Or you can do some more advanced stuff and actually pull data out and post that in Teams. So it's pretty powerful. It starts off easy, point and click. It can get a little more advanced depending on what type of logic you're doing in the flows and the interactions. But you can do some advanced things, like actually have things in a chat, for instance. When something keys off of it, it can reach out and ask for input directly from Power Automate. So like most things in the Microsoft world, there's a few different ways of doing the same thing, but it's really driven based on your overall need. If I just need a quick template on a flow and I'm going to ask a question, I might be able to just do that and Automate, ask for it just to be popped up. Somebody hits a chat or uploads a file, maybe it's just going to post a collection form in the chat, they fill it out, it goes back, and then that's fine. If I need a form and I got to have like business logic, right? It's got to do some calculation on it, it's adding up numbers, making sure that there's, text or numbers in a field. I'd probably use Power Automate for that. Now, Power Virtual Agents, again, this is another one, very easy to get started. When you jump in here, you're just going to click Start Now. There's no templates down here because that's going to open up when you get started, but you'll notice there's lots of educational links, and that was in Power Apps and Automate as well. So if we click over to chatbots, I don't think I have one in here, but I do got one. We're just going to click in. I'm going to let this load and just kind of show you some of the context in here. Out of the box, there's some default Q&A questions in here. So you will see this is, of course, how you actually test your bot and what's happening in here. Now, if I want to go in and see what I can ask this bot, I'm going to switch down on topics, and you'll see I've got a few things in here. So I've got trigger phrases. If I click that, I'm basically looking for any of these. Any of these will return a result that's actually plugged into this, right? So here we have the trigger phases, and then we're going to go to the authoring canvas. Let me flip over that. This is what's going to happen if it hears these. The bot will respond here, and then it will respond with these hours, right? And then you can always test that here. And we'll just say, yeah, that was helpful. And this is another flow that's in here, by the way, so that you can do that. And we'll say store hours. And it will also respond it. So you could actually see how this would flow if you had like an FAQ or internal documents that you want to surface with your bot. So like an HR bot, for instance, you could have in there like, what are our acceptable uses policies? Where is the employee handbook? You could just ask those simple questions instead of going to search for it and just have it return the direct link. So pretty handy. And again, it's all built into your Office 365 with your existing licenses to use all of these and to play with all of these. Some things to be aware of when you're looking at the Power Platform, just so that you're aware. When you build these directly in Microsoft Teams, they are available inside of Teams. So they're in, if you go on the web, the desktop, or mobile, they will be surfaced there, but they are not available outside of Teams. So if you have familiarity with the Power Platform and like Power Apps, where you can go in and say build off a SharePoint list, that is not directly available to you here when you build within the context of Microsoft Teams. The reason behind that is there's some additional functionality that they opened up that they've kind of walled off in Teams. One is called what they call the Dataverse. It's essentially an internal database that's not available outside of Teams. It just makes it easy for collecting data and storing that there in Teams in the app itself. And if you want to break out of that, if you want to take this and extend it, that's going to require some specific licensing that you have to add onto there, some paid Power Apps or Power Automate licenses to utilize that. So do be aware of that. There are some storage restrictions as well. So when you build a virtual agent or you're using Power Apps with that Dataverse, which if you open up Power Apps, it's gonna walk you through the Dataverse thing there. But there's a 2 GB limit per environment in this space, and you really can't extend that in this model. There's also some shared storage limits. So there's so many environments that you can create based on how many licenses you have, and as well as the total storage that you actually get there. When you exceed that, you essentially have to go in and clean up the old sites that might be using those that you don't need anymore. And if you are bumping up against that limit, it means you're either going to have to add licenses to increase that, even if you're not assigning them to users, or you're going to have to look at some of those very specific paid licenses for Power Virtual Agents or Power Apps or Power Automate. So, if you need help with that, if you're hitting that, of course, feel free to reach out to us. We can help walk you through what your options are there. Now, the last thing I'm going to share here, and it wasn't on my slide, but it's fairly new. I haven't spent a ton of time with it, but it's what's called Microsoft Viva. Some of you may have heard of it. It was released in March. And really, Viva is what Microsoft's calling their employee engagement platform. There are different modules that pretty much all have additional paid license requirements, except for one that's called Viva Connections, I believe. Essentially, what it does is it allows you to package up your SharePoint kind of homepage. So if you built an intranet per se, and if you've been struggling, like, where do I use intranet with my Microsoft Teams site? Because Teams will typically cannibalize what an intranet's used for. This lets you essentially bring that intranet and place it in Teams as an app. Today, you can't do that all through the UI. There's some PowerShell involved. You have to do some work with your SharePoint sites as far as setting that up, your navigation, getting it ready. Then you have to run through and create a package, which there's a pre-done script that Microsoft provided. It essentially walks you through, and you'll provide the URL and everything you need for the parameters in there. And then it bundles it up. It gives you a package that you would then deploy. You go into Teams and deploy it, and then push it out to everyone. So there will be some UI control over that coming. It's just not available yet through the admin center. So what that looks like, I'm going to jump over here. So this is a SharePoint page. Here we have this page that's already set up in here with our global nav and everything. If you've been in SharePoint, you've seen this. If not, it's just a SharePoint Modern page. One of the things that's a little bit different here is because this is deemed what they call a home site, and what we use for that Microsoft Viva connection is the navigation over here has changed a little bit. We have what's global nav here that's been enabled, and this allows us to link to other things when it's actually within the app from the Microsoft site, which I'll show you here in a second. And if we go down here, let's go back and click on it. When it's all packaged up, here it is. We'll have the landings. You can customize the logo on these as well. And if you click it, you'll notice I get the same page here. I don't have that left nav yet, but I've got this upper nav. I can reach my sites. I can interact with it in here. It kind of pulls away some of the extra menus and things from M365 so that it fits within Microsoft Teams. But I've essentially packaged my intranet up and throw that in Microsoft Teams now so that it's here. And I've got my other links up here. If I open this will open up that SharePoint site directly. And I don't have my other links because I think it doesn't show up in the web. It's only going to show up on the desktop version, and I have the web here. So yeah, yeah, that's only going to give me that. It's because of the web. All right. Yep, I was going to show that off, but on the desktop version, those other links are actually there. And now my menu's not closing, but that's all right. So that's really what we have there. I'm going to switch back here. throw this back up there, make sure it's still sharing. Yep, good. Okay. I'm going to walk back one slide just to kind of go over again the different ways that we can extend Microsoft Teams. And I think, even from that brief introduction, if you weren't familiar, you can see it's pretty easy to extend out the capabilities within Microsoft Teams and link it to other things that are out there, even outside of the Microsoft, ecosystem. And just to cover it real again, we have bots. Bots can be brought up and installed with different applications that are out there. You can customize your own bots and get more advanced. If you have in-house dev, the Azure Bot Framework is what's used behind Power Virtual Agents. But the Power Virtual Agents kind of gives you that point and click experience that's going to fall into that low-code bucket. The activity feed integrations, that's really that chat feed. You might have things that happen. So if I have an external project management tool, really what that means is that tool can drop notifications there on the feed. It does support two-way integrations if the app supports those API calls as well. Connectors and apps, again, those are the same things we saw. Like we can select an app from the gallery. It can be added in the left bar there. We can interact with Teams there. That might extend into some tab configurations. So if we're in a project context or a team context, we might have a specific app we work with in there. And if we want to create a workspace, we can extend it that way. The tabs, we were just talking about that. Messaging extensions, I mean, that's really where you're extending it out. It could be with Power Automate or a custom solution where it can work similar to a bot or not. It can just be a one-way, for instance, where I collect information and then that might trigger some type of, approval or activity that happens behind the scenes. You can even do a little bit of fancy stuff if you're talking about command and control in here. You can imagine if you're just like, hey, convert this document to PDF and have that kick off a flow behind the scenes, or pull back some status information. You can get pretty advanced with those type of things. Outgoing webhooks, we didn't really go into that here. That's more of a dev thing, but essentially that means I can have a trigger in Teams that will kick something off in another application, almost reverse of what we've been talking about here today. So I can add a chat. That chat will send a trigger out to another application that will do something with that chat, and it can essentially subscribe to those activities. But again, that's a higher level. That's more of a dev shop type thing. So that's really all I have today. Oh, and I've still got our December logo. I thought I updated that. So yes, if you need to contact us, if you've got more questions about how those extensions work, any of those things like the Power Platform or the tabs or the apps and those type of things, please feel free to reach out. You have the info at eGroup address up here, our direct number. If you're working with anybody, of course, reach out to them as well. They'll route it to the appropriate people who can answer your questions. So, if you have an account exec that you're already working with, or if you're already a customer and you have contacts in here, just shoot us a note, and we're happy to close that up with you and get you that answer. All righty, Carly, just a quick check-in. Did we have any questions that popped up in chat?
No questions today.
All right.
Christmas in July.
Yes. All righty. Well, thanks everyone for joining us again. Again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer those questions. Thank you.